Hello everyone and welcome back, or welcome to, for the first time, Bebop Banter, and more specifically, our first piece of YouTube exclusive content. My name is Wes, and for the long-time listeners, this is where you would normally hear me introduce my co-hosts Saeed and Demetrius, but for this little piece of content, it's going to be just me. For the new listeners, welcome to the Bebop Banter community. Thank you for finding us. We're an anime podcast that focuses on anime, manga, movies, TV shows, video games, and pop culture in general, but more leaning towards the anime and manga side. And you can listen to us wherever you listen to your podcasts, be it Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever, really. For the long-time people wondering why it's just me, with this YouTube exclusive content, we're going to go in a little bit of a different direction. Traditionally, in our podcast, it's myself, my co-host Demetrius, and my co-host Saeed. But we can't fit everything we want to talk about in certain podcasts, and honestly, not everybody's interested in the same stuff outside of what we talk about in our podcasts. So for these exclusive pieces we're going to be putting on YouTube, it might just be one of us, some combination of us, or people that have never been on the podcast, be it friends from outside or people that we might meet along the way. Just know that we're going to still strive to give you as good a product as we can, unscripted and live. We love fostering a community here and feeling like we're hanging out with you and you're hanging out with us. So why not come along for the ride? You can follow us on Instagram at Bebop Banter, follow us on Twitter at Bebop Banter, and now, since this is YouTube, I can say you can hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so that you know when we're putting content out, because outside of these, we are going to be uploading podcast episodes to the YouTube channel as time goes on. But if you do want to hear the latest, definitely check us out at Bebop Banter wherever you listen to your podcasts. All the formalities aside, all the introductions aside, I had to do it because it's our first time jumping to this brand new platform. What are we doing here today? Well, if you've listened to our prior podcast, you'll know we're all big video game fans. We're all some hardcore pro gamers, but we all like different types of games. Demetrius really enjoys playing PlayStation. Saeed will really play anything, and while I've been accused of being an Xbot because I bought a Series X instead of a PS5 on release, my heart lies with Nintendo. I played my dad's original Game Boy. I've had multiple different Game Boy colors, every iteration of Game Boy Advance and DS, from the regular DS to the 3DS to the 2DS, sometimes with multiple of the same system, just because I loved having that little door wedge 2DS alongside my new 3DS XL after all. But hey, that's neither here nor there. Of course, that means I have a Nintendo Switch. I might have more than one just because I'm kind of a crazy person like that. And I love collecting and playing Nintendo games. It kind of reminds me of my childhood, and just the variety really excites me and gives me that convenience of being able to pick up a different thing and experience a different thing whenever I want without having to dedicate myself sitting in front of a TV. Where's all this going though? Well, E3 just ended. That is right, we are hopping on the YouTube train at the same time that everyone else is hopping on the E3 train. So I thought, why not make the first piece of exclusive content a reaction to Nintendo's E3 press conference. If you want to hear me react to Microsoft after this, comment below. And if you want to hear me react to the other ones, because I watched every single one, also leave a comment. But I can't say I'm going to be as kind to Capcom and Square as I might be to Nintendo and Microsoft. All that aside, Nintendo pretty much won E3 for me because they included games that I myself am very, very excited for. Microsoft, I think, did what they needed to do, and again, if you want to hear me talk about that, definitely let us know. But Nintendo really had such a wide range of games that I'm just really excited to get my hands into. I've tried writing out a script or writing out an outline of how I would hit every single game that they revealed in this 40-minute span. But unfortunately, it just didn't work out well in a way that I feel like is digestible to all of you. And again, we enjoy being unscripted here. We enjoy giving our honest opinions on things in our first take reactions. So I just said, why not hit everything that I enjoyed from the presentation and let you guys tell me if I missed something that you guys enjoyed. Maybe there's something out there like a Life is Strange that I've never played of, but I've heard good things about, that you guys all like, and it might get me into it. We start a conversation about it. But I just want to get the power of positivity out there, like my boys The New Day, put out my thoughts on some games that got me really excited, and why maybe you might be excited about it as well after hearing me talk about it. with that being said, I'm gonna stop with all the formalities and just get right into the first announcement that really blew me away for certain reasons, and it just so happened to be the first announcement of the Nintendo Direct, and that's Kazuya Mishima from Tekken being a playable character in Smash. I will not sit up here and tell you that I am my boy Demetrius in Tekken. I am not. I am not good in Tekken. I am not very well versed in Tekken. All I know is that Kazuya was the protagonist for I think the first couple, turned into the antagonist, and has been in every Tekken but maybe 3, whichever one introduced Jin, because he was just in a cutscene or something. But regardless, Kazuya is iconic, almost as iconic as Heihachi, maybe more. Again, I'm not a Tekken fanboy. Not that that's a bad thing, being a fanboy, but I'm not too into the Tekken lore, but I can recognize that Kazuya and Tekken are innately linked. Why would I be excited if I don't know much about Tekken? Well, I view Smash as almost this video game history museum of sorts. You have reps from every company, you have reps from every type of game. And when you have SNK via Terry Bogard, who's in Fatal Fury and King of Fighters, and you have Ryu and Ken repping Street Fighter, it's just great to see that Tekken rep come in that really no one thought about, but it's so obvious because now outside of Mortal Kombat, you almost have all the major games covered in the fighting game community as far as traditional classic arcade fighters that you might think about. So just from a video game history standpoint, from a it's cool to have this collection of characters standpoint, and I mean, Capcom kind of dropped the Street Fighter Cross Tekken and the Tekken Cross Street Fighter. One of the two came out, but they dropped the other one, so it's time for fans to make their own in Super Smash Bros. I just love the idea, maybe more than I like the character, but I'm not going to complain. I have full confidence that Sakurai is going to knock it out of the park. The next game that actually caught me off guard, and maybe I'm in the minority of this, is a game called Astria Ascending. At first glance, it reminded me of the types of mobile games I play. If you listen to our podcast, you'll know I kind of play a lot of mobile games. And shout out to Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle. And the gameplay for Astria Ascending reminds me a lot of like an Epic 7 or a Grand Summoners. But it's just gorgeous hand-painted art. It's this kind of neo-gothic mixed with anime style, if that makes sense. Just one of those that like look it up to see how it looks, to see how it plays. Depending on the price, if it's a full price game, it might be a tough sell. But if you can get it at a cheaper price, at least that's what I'm looking for personally. It really, really interests me. I want to see more gameplay from it. I want to hear the soundtrack, get a little more pieces of art. But from what I saw, it looks like a good time. That's a smaller, exciting thing, but I really like pushing those indie games, or not indie games, but those games that maybe not a lot of people would consider. Moving on to a bigger announcement, Metroid Dread. How could I not say that this, or how could I exclude this, should I say, from this whole video? Metroid Dread has been teased since the mid-2000s. It's been 19 years since a chronologically new Metroid game, because I'm not counting Samus Awakens on the 3DS because it was just a remake. Metroid fans have been craving any sort of game. I know it's disappointing not to see Prime 4, but if you only know Metroid Prime and you haven't played a 2D Metroid, meaning side-scrolling, backtracking, exploring a winding labyrinth-type map, please give it a shot. It's one of those franchises, and I'm going to talk about another one later, that I would love to see get the sales numbers to back up constant support. Because Nintendo has its tried and true franchises, Mario, Zelda, you know, the ones that, I guess, Splatoon now, the ones that really, really bring in the bucks for them. Pokemon is one, even though the Pokemon company is its own thing. But they have those tried and true franchises, and even though they like to put Metroid and Samus kind of on that level, it's very rare that a game like this comes out. So I hope everyone supports it. I'm definitely buying it day one. I hate that scalpers are really, really price gouging the collector's edition, so I have to get the regular retail one. But any Metroid game is good. I will take any Metroid game. So moving on from Metroid Dread, WarioWare Get It Together has me pumped as well. Some of my favorite memories as a kid on Game Boy Advance and then later on DS were passing the Game Boy Advance around with the WarioWare Twisted cartridge in there that had a gyro sensor built in, so you actually had to twist the game to play it. Or passing my DS and playing WarioWare Touch. Same thing with the Wii, playing WarioWare Smooth Moves. It's just, WarioWare games are sets of micro games for people that don't know. And the mini games last maybe 5, 6, 7 seconds, and they just repeat and get faster and faster and faster with a zany art style that's so surreal and so unlike anything Nintendo typically puts out. You add co-op onto that, because this new one has co-op, and it could just be such a great party game for people around you, you know? Get together as the world is starting to reopen, play some goofy games, have a good time. WarioWare, and it's not a full price game, so that's always a plus. With game prices going up, seeing a cheaper first party game is always nice on my wallet. So after WarioWare, of course, came one of the big ones. I was not surprised because it was leaked, but Shin Megami Tensei 5 might be the most anticipated Switch game ever for me. It is the only Switch game that has yet to release, outside of I think Steep, which was cancelled, from the initial Switch reveal that had like Octopath, Mario Odyssey, Splatoon. It's the only one. And it has been stuck in development hell for a long, long time, with them having to remake it to try to get it to fit on consoles because the last few had been on handhelds, Shin Megami Tensei 4 being one of my favorite games of all time. So seeing this gameplay was really gratifying. It looks gorgeous, it looks like they went full open world, and if you've never played a Shin Megami Tensei game, think Persona, because Persona is the non-apocalyptic spin-off. And if you've never played a Persona game, think Pokemon, but with demons and kind of edgy character design, and in the case of Shin Megami Tensei, post-apocalyptic, decision-driven world, where you can get a multitude of endings based off of your alliances. Very mature, very fun. It's a game that's filled with despair, but there's a weird sense of hope within it as you craft your way through the world. Love it. 10 out of 10 recommend. Even if you don't like JRPGs, if it lives up to its legacy, it's going to be a classic. After Shin Megami Tensei 5, though, another smaller surprise, similar to Astria Ascending, was the announcement that Fatal Frame Maiden of Blackwater is getting a Switch version. I will 100% admit, I bought it on the Wii U. Yes, I was one of the 12 million people that bought a Wii U, and I maybe played a couple hours of it. Not by any fault of the game, I just got busy. So I'm really, really, really excited to have the opportunity to play it on a stronger system, in handheld with the camera controls, because Fatal Frame is a survival horror game that incorporates almost a Pokemon Snap-esque picture-taking mechanic, but to detect and deter ghosts from you. It could be great in handheld if they have gyro controls or something along those lines, just to be more immersive. But I'm all about survival horror. Rather than the Resident Evil zombies, it's more of that Japanese The Ring, The Grudge type of horror that is for a very specific set of people that love that genre, but at the same time separates itself from more of the modern stuff coming out to the point where I feel like it warrants a purchase. And hey, if you don't have a Switch or you prefer other consoles, it's coming to other consoles too. Another example of a game where I feel like in the West it hasn't gotten the attention it's gotten in Japan. So more sales on this, especially considering it didn't even get a physical release on the Wii U when it came to the US. More sales like this could really bolster it up. Let people know, hey, we want more survival horror other than just the Resident Evils that come out. So Fatal Frame Maiden of Blackwater really, really surprised me with its release. But it did not surprise me as much as the announcement that came shortly thereafter. There was some stuff in between, like Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope. But Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, coming out this holiday, shocked me. For people that don't know, Intelligent Systems, the company behind Fire Emblem, also used to have a series called Advance Wars. And if you want to think about gameplay, think Fire Emblem, but cartoony and military. So you have tanks and planes and helicopters and military commanders, that type of style. it kind of went away after the DS. There was one on DS, so Advance Wars 1 and 2 were on Game Boy Advance. Then there was one on the DS, I think it was Days of Ruin. And Fire Emblem just kind of took over from there. And Advance Wars fans, like Metroid fans, have been clamoring for some sort of new content. So when that trailer started, that was probably the shock of the show for me. I mentioned Metroid was maybe the second shock of the show for me, and that's because it had kind of been leaked out already over the last couple years that Mercury Steam was working on something. But Advance Wars, I had no idea that it was coming out. And to make matters even more exciting for me personally, besides just being a fan of tactics games, I have a backstory for this one. So I beat Advance Wars 1 on Game Boy Advance, and I went on a family trip, like a cross-Europe trip, because I used to live in Europe, with my family and some friends. We were going from battlefield to battlefield in Normandy and all around. And I had Advance Wars 2 on Game Boy Advance, and I lent it to one of my friends. We were on a bus tour. I lent it to one of the friends that was on the trip, and he said he was going to play it. A couple days later, I asked for it back. He had lost it in one of the hotels. Never beat it. I have a history of not beating games. I don't want to say it stems from there, because it is an issue of me collecting games, but I have a history of not beating games, and that's one that I've been wanting to beat. But buying it on Game Boy Advance and having to buy a Game Boy Advance is economically not the smartest move I could make. So a remake of Advance Wars 1 and 2, even though it's at full price, similar to Metroid, any new Advance Wars game is a win for me. So I'll be picking it up, and if you're a fan of tactics types of games, I highly suggest you pick it up as well. And I will say the same thing about this that I said about Metroid and Fatal Frame. If the community as a whole, the gaming community, including the people that have wanted a new Advance Wars game, can get this game to sell, hopefully Nintendo and Intelligent Systems or whoever is working on this can see the numbers, can know there's a demand, especially with indie games like Wargroove taking over, and can put out a modernized version similar to the renaissance that Fire Emblem has seen happen. So please, again, if it interests you, pick it up. And that brings us to the end of the presentation, the Zelda portion of the presentation, where they said this is the final segment we will be presenting. And I'm not gonna lie, I got a little worried there when they started with Age of Calamity DLC, and then they went into Skyward Sword HD, and then they did the Game & Watch reveal. I was like, we might just get a tiny CG trailer for the sequel to Breath of the Wild, which is one of my favorite games of all time. In my opinion, one of the best games of the modern era. And then we got a CG trailer, just a really quick cutscene, and it faded to black, and my heart started to sink until the music kicked in, bright white screen comes up, and we get Link jumping from the battle bus of Fortnite onto various sky islands and roaming the grounds of Hyrule, looking up and seeing islands floating in the skies above him, using what looks to be new items like a flamethrower and new Sheikah Slate powers through some sort of ancient technology arm. We got to look at a character that may or may not be Link, as well as the Link that we're familiar with from Breath of the Wild and Age of Calamity, this particular timeline. So many questions. I mean, powers seem to involve time, so I wouldn't be surprised if something was going on. So many questions coming up with just a few little answers, but it was good enough to make me fall in love with the franchise again. Not that I ever fell out of love with it, but during the Breath of the Wild's initial development cycle, where we didn't hear anything and it kept getting delayed, and you kind of get tired of it, the release of that game fixed it. And I was getting into that groove where I was getting tired of just the memes and the jokes of the sequel to Breath of the Wild. We're never going to see it. And finally seeing gameplay of it made me realize how much more I wanted to get into that world again. I mean, I turned on Breath of the Wild and I started playing it all over again, 400 plus hours in. Every shrine completed, every Korok seed gathered, just to wander around. It was a powerful moment in E3 for me, based off of the games that I like to play, and the Nintendo presentation as a whole was just incredible. As a recap, they introduced a new fighting game character, good old Kazuya from Tekken in Super Smash Bros., so that's a fighting game. They showed off a super interesting artistic style in Astria Ascending, looks like a form of RPG. Metroid Dread, a good old side-scrolling kind of Metroidvania that the game itself has helped define that particular genre. WarioWare, just a fun party game with a bunch of mini-games. Shin Megami Tensei, a massive sprawling JRPG. Fatal Frame is the horror series. Advance Wars 1 and 2 for tactics, and then Breath of the Wild to cap it all off with that gorgeous open world game. I said it in the beginning that I thought Microsoft did what they needed to do. And from the standpoint of a more traditional or just modern gamer, it might have won E3 for them. They showed off 30 games, 27 are coming to Game Pass. Gorgeous looking first person shooters and racing games and Western style RPGs from Bethesda, as well as a few other smaller games. But Nintendo just showed off what made Nintendo magical to me. I had franchises that I'd grown up with through almost every stage of my life coming back to the Switch. I had games that I didn't think I would ever see again re-revealed. I had games from a swath of different genres all coming out within the same year. It truly was one of those where my wallet was hurting, but my heart was truly full. Because when I can pull up a list of games that cover so many different genres from so many different developers, from so many different eras, it's something that's really special to me. So while people might argue about who won E3 and what game really was the best reveal, to me, outside of Nintendo, it all just comes down to what you enjoy and what type of games that you enjoy. Like I said, Nintendo won for me far and away. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't have liked Microsoft, or you couldn't have liked Ubisoft, or Capcom, or Square Enix, even though I kind of clowned on those other companies in the beginning. Or maybe Sony's your favorite, they just decided to skip E3. So as one last kind of piece of outreach for you, comment below with what your favorite game from the Nintendo E3 presentation was, or just comment below with what your favorite game from E3 was in general. I'd love to hear your thoughts, I'd love to have a conversation on certain things, and I love that you all have tuned in for our very first YouTube exclusive. Again, you can follow us at Bebop Banter on Instagram and Twitter. We love communicating and interacting with everybody that tries to reach out to us. And we love for you guys to take a listen to our podcast if you're into anime, manga, or just pop culture in general. We hope you all stick around for the ride. We're really excited to get back into this platform. And again, for the long-time listeners, I normally don't do the outro, but since my partner's in crime on here, I finally get to say, to be continued, Bebop don't stop. Peace.